You know, there are some really sweet dogs who can react badly when another pet or a person comes near their food. And if you try to reach in to break up a fight or take your dog's food bowl away, you can get injured. We can bring out the best in everybody on this thing. Well, stay with me. We'll get this right. Does anybody here have a dog who has reacted badly like that, who's fought with another dog or gone after your hand? Put the details in the comment line. Let's talk about this thing. There are some excellent structures and you avoid the whole problem. But I'm going to share some excellent underlying reasons why these things occur. And by the way, in case we haven't met, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm residency trained in veterinary behavior medicine with many years of experience in general practice and emergency medicine, which includes a lot of dogfight injuries, many times over food. By the way, Miss America, this is the Nickel family border collie, Miss America, and we have two cats. And Carolyn, if you'd hand me those cat feeders, that of course predictably brings the cats up onto the desk. And if you can hear me, would you please hit the wow button so that I know? And also, if you can, if you find this information helpful, send me some hearts so that I know I'm doing something useful. And by the way, I'd like to share a story with you. I think this will give you a clear understanding of what we're talking about here. Thank you, Carolyn. Gentlemen.
Well, I spilled some of
Oh, I see. They're busy. Yeah, well, you know, you don't want to interrupt busy cats. Gentlemen. All right. Well, they'll drop by, won't they, Miss America? Anyway, okay. So here's a story, and I made notes on it because I didn't want to forget any of the important parts. It's easy. Thank you. Look, Gaston. Here, Gaston. There we go. All right. We don't want our cats competing either any more than we want our dogs competing. So these folks, Anthony and Richard, they have these two whippets. They've had whippets all their lives. They think it's a wonderful breed, and I happen to agree with them. They're lovely dogs. And these dogs' names are Samson and Sterling. They're 4 years old. They're litter mates. They've been together since day one. They got these little guys as puppies. Well, things seem to be going okay until about 18 months or so ago, when Samson became more aggressive towards Sterling. And about a month before they brought these dogs in, and I've seen them fairly recently, they got into a squabble over a squeaker toy, and Samson bit Sterling on the shoulder, causing a laceration that necessitated surgery, and it had to be sutured. Now, there were only 3 sutures necessary, according to Richard, but thank you, Carolyn. And, you know, to my experience, you know, a wound that only takes 3 sutures isn't really that severe. But, you know, it's mighty important to these folks. And I'll tell you something else that makes it significant to me, is that with our research on aggression between family dogs, in my experience, I can tell you that there are fight wounds that they advance the problem. You have 2 dogs like Samson and Sterling who've developed actually a much longer standing animosity, usually in the context of something that they compete over, like food. And they are sure that you know, the great famine is going to start in about 20 minutes, and if they don't get all of the food right now, they won't get any of it. Well, here's the problem. These dogs finally started to squabble. They weren't just exchanging dirty looks, which, again, most pet parents don't notice because they're not trained in that stuff. And when things escalate to the point where there are injuries, now we've really pretty far down the pike, largely because one of those dogs now not only associates fear with being near the other dog, but also significant physical pain. And when we start seeing wounds like this, the problem can spiral out of control, and the frequency of the fights increases dramatically, and the severity of the wounds. And in fact, these things can get so bad so fast that sometimes we can't turn it around, and people have to find another home for one of their beloved dogs. And we do not want that. Okay? And by the way, these are fictitious names. Carolyn pointed that out, and I think that's a good point. Actually, they're the names of other pets, but not these ones. Okay. So anyway, so during this period, Sterling had become more reticent. He's the lower status dog, the guy who's getting womped on by his brother. He became withdrawn and skittish, often trembling and shuddering at sudden movements and noises. He didn't used to do that. So this dog is starting to develop a generalized anxiety problem because he's just really kind of scared out of his wits when there's other food. And thank you for the hearts. I'm glad somebody can hear me here. Okay. By the way, don't forget to tell me you're here. And if you've had a problem, something like this, or any pet-related question on physical things outside of behavior, you're very welcome to put those questions to me. And look, I've got somebody here. Whoops. Oh, Tony, you're in the way of my, swipe left. There we go. Oh, Ellie and Diane Kimbrell Howard. Oh, thank you for coming.
Cindy.
And Cindy, too. Cindy, thank you so much. Cindy, I'm delighted that you always come. Thank you for that. I'm glad you find this information helpful. So, what they found is they have a dog door in this house as well, and they found Samson camped out near the dog door, preventing the lower status brother, Sterling, from getting through. And you think, why in the world would they compete for that? Because when you get this kind of a struggle between two dogs in a canine social group, they'll compete for almost anything. You can sort of understand food because dogs are driven by scarcity. You know, even though they're domestic pets in this home, and believe me, these fellows love their pets. There isn't anything these dogs would ever go without. But that's human logic, isn't it? It's lost on dogs. They think that the food supply is going to dry up, and everything else is a high-value, scarce resource. And of course, in this pair, the dog who really doesn't have healthy behavior, who's really getting way carried away, is Samson, of course, and we'll talk more about that. So about 6 or 8 months ago, Samson became impatient while Anthony was preparing their food in the kitchen. Okay? Samson whined and barked, and Sterling stood back. You know, smart move on his part. The greatest tension between the dogs occurs in the open kitchen. You know, like a lot of modern houses, they've got an open floor plan. And when they hear Anthony putting their food bowls on the counter, I mean, that's the trigger, the dogs run into the room. And Samson circling the island, barking. Well, that's way too much excitement, isn't it? And when a dog gets that highly aroused, they can lose impulse control, and the other guy's close by, and he could take a nip out of him. So there's one thing we're going to change, all right? So the dogs remain agitated, and I mean, this goes on every day, twice a day, until their bowls are put in separate feeding rooms, and the doors are closed. Now, they did not need me to tell them that. But one fundamental, and I'll get to this a little bit later, is that all pets, whatever the species, should be fed at the same time, usually twice a day, in separate rooms with the doors closed, so that when they have food, they not only are not together, they can't see each other, and they can't even access each other. There's absolutely no reason to run the risk of competition. Again, we'll talk more about that later. So anyway, these smart guys, they figured that out already, but they didn't have it all figured out. Okay? After the dogs were finished eating, they were still highly aroused, especially Samson. And so to try to dispel that problem or redirect it, then they would throw a toy for one dog, and he'd go and chase it, and they hoped would derail the problem. But the trouble was that these dogs were way too behaviorally aroused around food, and there were high risks. And of course, in one case, there wasn't a problem. Now, on top of all that, Samson is a counter surfer. And you know, they learn that if you leave out a little bit of food on your counter, and I mean, right, who doesn't from time to time, right? And they can jump up there and snag it. Well, that's a self-rewarding behavior, isn't it? I mean, if the dog gets an immediate food reinforcer for counter surfing, why would they not do it? You know, so people ask me, well, why does my dog counter surf? And I say, why did the bank robber Willie Sutton back in the 30s rob banks? Well, you know, a journalist asked him that one time, and he said, because that's where the money is, right? Okay. So let's try to keep our counters clean, because not only that, our dogs can swallow bones and other stuff, right? Okay. So when Richard cooks, the dogs stand and watch at the kitchen island looking for treats, and he sometimes gives them tidbits as he cooks. And Samson often snaps at Sterling, and he also snaps at Richard's hands. this dog is way too excited. So the tendency that many people have is, they scold and they reprimand the dog, they squirt it with water, this kind of stuff, without realizing it. When we put a dog like this, especially in this position, and allow him to have this kind of access, we're setting him up for failure. And then, we bust them and try to punish the crime. When in fact, dogs by their nature are highly competitive. Yes, in the wild and in our homes, they form a group, they're highly social, they communicate, but it's also a concept of scarcity that's genetically programmed into their brains. And they know that nature isn't always kind. And if it's a lean year, then somebody might not make it, even in our homes. So we have to assume that our dogs are going to be like that. And there we go. And somebody else showed up. I think that person's question is going to come in a minute. The iPad's a little slow, so let's be patient. Okay, so at one point when they threw the squeaky toy, of course, Samson, went closer, bounced closer to Sterling. Samson ran over and nailed Sterling when he tried to get the toy away. So they compete for toys, they compete for food. Many dogs, it's food only. So it's almost always Samson who gets the toy. And then they throw another toy because they're trying to treat their dogs as equals. Well, there's a mistake for you. They are not little people in furry suits. They're not children where they have to have the identical size cookie. There is a hierarchy. And our responsibility as our dog's ultimate leaders, and they regard us that way, is to support the hierarchy. And it's a canine hierarchy. They're not little people in furry suits. They're not little children wannabes. They're dogs. And in this case, they're adult dogs. And they have their own hardwired structure in their brains. And it's our responsibility to learn that and to provide canine leadership. Okay? So, good job, Tony. So these dogs, they needed a structure. And they needed to have these problems avoided. They even competed for attention with their people. If these two fellows would sit down in the evening and watch TV, one dog on either side, and the dogs would start to compete for attention. And of course, Sterling, the lower status dog, often got the short end of the stick and got aggression from Samson. And again, people want to correct this because they want their dogs to be with them. I get it. I want my dog to be with me too. So here's what we did for these pets. I explained that Sterling has experienced intimidation from Samson a whole lot of the time, and that Samson is not a happy dog when he's out of control. People think, oh, the dog likes being that way. No, they don't. Dog's way out of control. And so I explained that their well-being was suffering because they weren't relaxed. They weren't at peace. And we all want a peaceful life, don't we? So what I had to explain to them was that we had to provide consistent canine-specific leadership. And that Samson, being the higher status dog, just as though these two boys were free living in the wild, he had a legitimate right to get first access, and in fact, by the dog's perception, only access to high-value resources. People don't want to do that. They want to treat their dogs as equals. And you can, as long as the high-ranking dog does not see his subordinate getting the high-value reinforcers and rewards. So sometimes when they wanted to treat little Sterling, the lower status guy, like like royalty, they could get him a brand new car and a dream vacation. They had to put Samson out of sight or in a different room. That's really important. And people, they don't want to do that, but if you don't, this high status dog can continue getting further out of control. And we had to protect everybody's well-being here. Okay? So, avoidance, feeding them in separate rooms. So I explained that here's what we do with a feeding structure for dogs. And I would encourage everybody to do this, whether you have a history like this with your dogs or not. And that is, oh, Laura, hey, I'm glad you're here too. I'm glad to see you. Thank you. Tell me where you're from, by the way. So here's what we do at feeding time. Just like these two dogs where, Samson would get highly agitated and run around the island in the kitchen while one of these fellows was putting the food bowls down and putting their food in it and getting highly because of the anticipation, and then the other guy get too close to him and he could get nailed just for that reason. Before you even go near the food bowls, which by the way are kept stacked in a closed cabinet, I've known dogs who have fought over clean, empty food bowls left on the floor because they associate that with food. So you keep them out of sight, door closed, okay? And then you say, okay, feeding time, right? Okay, so here's the room that we always feed Sterling in. Sterling, I'm going to open the door, you go in there, close the door. And this other room over here, this is where we feed Samson. He goes in there, closes the door. You want to feed one dog outside? That's fine, but you know, not right outside that sliding glass door, because they can swap threatening body postures and signals through the window, and you still have a big problem. You want to completely divorce these dogs' intensity about eating from being together. So they're in separate rooms. They no way can get near each other. And then you go and you bring the food bowls out of the cabinet, you put the food in them, and then these gentlemen were to go to first, well, it doesn't matter which dog first. You know, Samson open his door, push his food bowl in, close the door, he's in there. Take the other bowl, open Sterling, the other guy, push his food bowl in, close the door, and wait. Give everybody plenty of time to eat, 10 minutes, whatever. Now you can pick up the food bowls. But everybody's still pretty aroused. So we're going to go first to one food room and open the door, bring out that dog's food bowl, close the door, and the dog's still in there. And you go to the other food room, open that door, bring out that bowl, close the door, and that guy's still in there. Then you clean the food bowls, stack them up, put them up in the cabinet, close the door, and then you open the doors so that the dogs can be together. Here's the fundamental rule. When your dogs are together, there is never food of any description available at all, and I really strongly urge this whether you have ever had aggression problems or not, and I'll tell you why, is because they're swapping body signals. Very subtle, because that's almost entirely how dogs communicate, which they do almost continually, and there could be threats that could escalate. Don't fool yourself. It's kind of like wearing a safety belt in the car, you know? You probably won't get into an accident, but, you know, just in case, right? So, preventive medicine, avoidance of the arousal trigger, not just the food itself, but all of the attendant triggers need to be avoided, okay? Now, what about this problem with them competing for access to their people while these fellows were watching TV in the evening? I said, do this. You got nails in your wall where you hang pictures, haven't you? Okay, well, in your living room or family room or wherever you like to watch TV, the farthest area of that room, away from the couch where you gentlemen sit, I want you to drill a hole through the sheetrock into a stud and screw a hook in there, you know, like you get at the home improvement store. And before you sit down, one dog or the other has a leash attached to his collar, and you take that dog over there, thank you for that heart, and you hang the handle of the leash on that hook. And that dog can maybe have a food toy over there or have a chew toy, but he's by himself in the same room. Meantime, you're with the other guy snuggling up on the couch. With greater distance, there is less arousal. And what they're doing is creating distance. Now, that doesn't work in every case. You give that a try. It may be necessary to put one dog in another room. But they can have their dogs with them, but separating them. So only one has proximity to the people, but the other guy is far enough away it's not a big problem. Okay? That does not always work, but it's a good starting point. Okay? So we talked to them about not giving them treats when they're together. That's a pain in the neck. People love to get treats. You know, one of these fellows was the man who did all the cooking in this house, and he would often give little snacks while he was cooking. No way. We don't do that anymore. In fact, only one dog is allowed in the kitchen while there's food being prepared. Now, that dog could get snacks if you want to. We really sort of frown on that. But if the other guy is way out of, I mean, he can't even come near. He's out in the yard or in a different room. That's okay. It's setting them up to avoid the competition that is really essential. And these dogs had fought over toys too, so don't throw toys when they're together. You know the old story, you go to the doctor and you say, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." And the doctor says, "Well, then don't do this," right? Okay. We can't. Hello from Europe to the wonderful Doc. Isabella, thank you for coming. Gosh, tunes in all the way from Europe. So, anybody have a case like this that they want to share? Looks like somebody has a question here. There we go. Nothing. If there are questions, you're welcome to put them in there. Or if you've had an experience like this that's been a problem for you. And by the way, you're welcome to share these kinds of videos of mine with any of your pet-loving friends and encourage them to go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com. And at the bottom of the homepage, you can subscribe. It costs nothing. And when you put your email address in there every Tuesday morning, we will send you my weekly media blog, which is also my newspaper column in the Albuquerque Journal from the week before, and my Facebook Live video. We're going to be doing some new things. And by the way, one new thing that we're doing is that, of course, my clinical practice involves consultations with people and their cats and dogs with behavior disorders in the exam room. But we're also offering something new now. It's called Zoom group conferences, which we do by Zoom. And they're groups of 4 pet families, individual pet parents or their whole family, but 4 participants along with me. And we're doing it with cats too, but most often they're dogs because, unfortunately, cat people don't ask for these services as often as they really probably should. Anyway, next week we're doing one on dogs. It'll be Wednesday the 16th at 4 o'clock, Carolyn?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Zoom group conference.
I'm sorry, 4.
Yes, and if you go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, you can sign up to participate. It's far less expensive than an individual consultation. It is not in-depth veterinary medicine because I'm not examining these pets hands-on. I cannot prescribe, but I can give people a lot of help, very specific to their problem because I gather a history and we share information among all the people there, and I can get people rolling. And sometimes people sign up to participate in a group because they're not sure they need a one-on-one consultation. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. Anyway, you're welcome to sign up on the website. Just go down the homepage and it's right below. In fact, it's right at the top. There's a button. You can click on one button if you want to participate in a group. Click on the other if you want an individual consultation. So we try to make it. So, dog fights. What happens if your dogs start to fight over food and you think, well, we missed the opportunity to prevent this thing and now they're getting after it? Do not reach in and grab your dogs to try to separate them. None of us wants our dog injured, especially by the other dog we love, but they can redirect their aggression, and whether you put your arm in there or your leg or a broom handle, anything that obstructs a dog's access to the target of its hostility when it's really highly agitated, they can't reach the other dog, they immediately literally split second, redirect to whatever got in the way. And so if your dog bites you badly, it is not because your dog intended to. It really wasn't about you, but you made the mistake of putting part of your body in there. Do not do that. Use the broom handle or a chair, but do not reach in. Obviously, we want people to avoid this kind of problem in the first place, but do not reach in with your hand. So here's somebody who makes a mistake like that all the time, are toddlers. Toddlers, if you've ever raised kids or been around them, they're always walking around the house carrying a cracker or some other piece of food. I mean, that's just part of being a toddler. You can't make them stop doing that. And so when they're doing that, they're dropping food, which we swept up the floors a lot when our children were that age. And if you have more than one dog, they will sometimes compete for the food that the toddler drops. There's a problem. Or here's another one that's really a problem, is you have maybe just one dog that has an issue with food-related aggression, and the toddler drops food, only this time the little guy says, oh, I dropped part of my cracker, and reaches down to pick it up and competes with the dog, and the child gets bitten. We don't want our kids bitten. And people sometimes make rash decisions. They suddenly say, well, we can't keep this dog. And sometimes that's true. You cannot keep a dog who's bitten a child. But sometimes we can parse these cases apart. Isabella, yes. Miss America's right here. Miss America, will you sit up so Isabella can see you? Here, girlfriend, sit up, you silly girl. There you go. Everybody can see you now. There. She's quite beautiful, and that's why, she's Miss America. So avoidance is really important, and oftentimes what I tell people with kids is you've got to think ahead. And when it's time for that little kid to run around with those crackers or whatever food that he's eating, or she, it doesn't matter, we put the dog behind a baby gate. And oftentimes the kids go over and hand food to the dog through the baby gate. A lot of this stuff, less than ideal. It works out in your home. But you do not want that little child dropping food that your dogs can compete for, or that the child can compete with the dog for. Oh my goodness. Now here's another one. Indulge me on this one if you don't mind. Many people, very well-meaning, sometimes dog trainers, who believe they have the inside story, but are not aware of the research, and we're going to talk about a little research in just a second, just a little. They tell people that they should, especially when you get a new puppy, is give it food in a bowl and then take the food away, and then put it down and take it away. There is nothing that teaches the puppy that you want it to know, other than maybe that it can't trust you. Taking a dog's food away has no value. This often goes along with this misguided concept that dogs will try to dominate their people or run them over if we don't lay down the law early and point out who's boss and make sure that they don't forget. It is exceptionally rare for a dog to try to dominate its person. So rare, I may have seen it once in my career, and even in that case, I'm not sure that I saw it. That's how seldom it occurs. So we don't teach anything of value by doing that. And of course, some dogs say, okay, take my food. But then those people who believe that a dog should allow that, and if the dog grumbles or takes a nip or growls or snaps, then they punish the dog. And this is a total setup for failure, and it's pointless. Please don't do that. And if I ever have the pleasure of having lunch with anybody here who's enjoying this little Facebook Live with me, please eat from your own plate and don't reach toward mine, because that could damage the friendship, okay? So don't do that. It's pointless, and there's no value in it. And so when you feed a dog, this dog, when she's fed, she's the only dog we have, but Tony, one of our cats, has made the mistake of coming near her food, and she has growled and pinned him to the floor. And I'm like, well, she's never hurt him, but I'm not letting that happen more than once. I made that mistake. So she goes in the utility room where we feed her, and the door's closed. And no person or cats are allowed in there until she's done eating. For crying out loud, give this dog some peace, because she is a dog, and she's sure that the great famine is coming. And the only way for me to change that in her brain would be a brain transplant. And, well, we like her the way she is, so we're not going to be doing that. We accept her for what she is. And acceptance is still one of the best things that you can do for anybody, isn't it? So here's a little research. I'll share this with you briefly. This is called Canine Aggression Toward Family Members in Spain. You can say, well, they did this study in Spain. Yeah, they mostly speak Spanish there, but the dogs, they speak dog, just like the dogs here. Okay, so it really doesn't matter where it's done. This is clinical presentations and related factors. There were 5 authors on this study. It was quite robust, very good study. And I'm just going to read you a few sentences from this. Dogs receiving treats from the table were more likely to present aggression toward family members. Just in general. How come? Because giving treats from the table may be a way of interacting in an inconsistent and unexpected manner for the dog. Here's why it's unexpected. It's because they are genetically hardwired not to share food, especially with their leaders. So when we do that, or when these gentlemen in this other story with Samson and Sterling, when he's cooking and he insists on giving little tidbits, that's sending a really confusing signal to the dog, because dogs think like dogs, not like people. We love them like little people, but they're members of another species, and if we're going to help them bring out the best, we must give them leadership that they understand, treat them like dogs. And so when we confuse them by feeding them from the table, that's inconsistent and that's confusing to them. And that they are more prone to show anxiety and aggression. This came out in the study. Okay? In fact, the lack of consistency in interactions has been found to be associated with aggressive behavior in another study. These things, it substantiates what was learned in a whole different study. here's the last and really valuable point here. Stress and uncertainty are likely to be the consequence of the interactions between owners and their dogs, but also by the application of inappropriate training, such as punishment. Again, people make the mistake because they don't understand, and that's what I'm trying to share, is the understanding here, is that if you set your dogs up to fail by treating them inappropriately, like people, and they make mistakes, and you're all over them like a cheap suit, you've accomplished nothing of any value. So please treat them like dogs. So, has anybody been bitten trying to stop a dog fight? Let me see, has anybody got a question like that in there? Let's see. Nobody's reporting any bites. Okay. I've known plenty of these things in my... Susan is with us. Diane, Allie, Laura, Darren. Wonderful, Darren. Thank you for coming. You guys are great. I'm so glad you're here. So, if there are questions and you don't want to bring them up here, you're welcome to go to my Facebook page and post them. Oftentimes I find them so useful, I not only answer them to the person who sent them in, but I put them in my newspaper column because they apply to so many other pets. I always try to encourage people to take the time to build a foundation of trust and choice and freedom for your pets, because dogs and cats, just like people, here's a similarity, they can become obstinate if their leader only wants their needs met, and that they can learn anytime during a relationship that they can trust us not to intimidate them. You don't look very intimidated, Miss America. Would you like to sit up and get another biscuit? Here. Will you sit up? Oh, a little higher. A little higher. Oh, that's very nice. You're a big girl. They should earn things like that by doing something, because dogs are wired to earn the privilege of food. It is not an entitlement, even though we want it to be. That's not how they think. So, anybody else have a question? I think that's it. I hope you find this information useful. And thanks so much for sharing your evening with me and with Miss America and the cats. You had all the food on the writing table, so they're on the floor. So thank you. Have a nice weekend. And I'd love to see you guys next week. Oh, it looks like we have a question. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Elisa, we have a giant hound who postures and intimidates the other dogs at mealtime. We have put them in separate rooms before getting food ready. Any other ideas? You are totally on the mark. I think the fundamental here is that any food that any dog in your home gets, if there's more than one pet, they need to be by themselves when they get it. And using food as a reinforcer for good behavior, following basic commands, very, very strong way of reinforcing, and it's excellent. But if the other dogs are around, you might be setting them up for a problem. So as cumbersome as it is, and because food, when it's used as a reinforcer, needs to immediately follow the desirable behavior. So if you're going to teach a dog or train a dog or practice the skills, put it in another room away from the other dogs so you can get food from the treat bag, and then you're done, put away the treat bag, and then the dogs are back together. That's the big thing. Often, I've known dogs, this is such a common problem, Elisa, that I've known cases where people are cooking. They studiously avoid giving their dogs tidbits while they're preparing food, but it smells mighty good. And those dogs are in the kitchen, and they start to get kind of aroused, and pretty soon they're snarking and then fighting, and nobody's been even offered any food, but they associate that room with food, and even if you keep a spotless kitchen, it has that scent of food because you've cooked in it. And so I've got a few clients where it's been clear that those dogs should never be in the kitchen at the same time, even when there's nobody else in there. I had one case where, they have a trash can, right? And it's got food wrappers and that kind of stuff in there. And the kitchen can be clean. There can be nobody cooking. There's certainly no one giving food out. But the trash can is associated with the scent of food, and dogs have fought right next to the trash can. Well, you got to start setting up baby gates and other structures so that they're not together, because when they start to fight, these things escalate exponentially. The fights occur with increasing frequency and with worsening injuries, and Well, if you think I'm serious about this, you've caught on. I've stitched up way too many of these. I've seen the worst happen. I don't want to horrify anybody with the worst case scenario, but we love to avoid this. So thank you for asking. Just make sure that when there's food available, your dogs are never together. And that's really the bottom line on this. And I hope that's helpful. And sometimes my iPad, there we go. Okay. Is there anybody else? I think that's all the questions. Thank you for that one, Elisa. I appreciate that. And everybody have a great week. And I'll see everybody next Thursday, same time, 5 o'clock Mountain Time, right? And anybody wants to participate in the Zoom group next Wednesday, and if it fills up, go to my website and you can pick the next Wednesday. I do them almost every Wednesday. So thank you, and I hope everybody stays safe.